Well, hey everybody, welcome back to Take That, You Worm.
I almost forgot what we were called.
I never forget.
Never forget.
This week I read chapters 13.8 through 14.2.
And man, big things going on.
This was a big stretch. Once upon a time, a young lad called Bradley told me that there was a Berserk eclipse moment for anyone that has read Berserk.
In terms of just kind of darkness level of the story.
I I think it's safe to say I hit it.
Yeah, this is one of the like max darkness levels I think Worm reaches. It is pretty dire.
Is it weird that I think that's kind of a bummer? I kind of wanted like another one, like later down the line. But let's
Oh,
not jump.
there's plenty of horrible things that happen to people, don't worry.
Great, because that's what Worm's all about. Uh, Let me do. So we're keeping up with the schedule of last week. That being said, as we're recording this, I still haven't posted that new episode, so we didn't get feedback on what people thought. So hey, you'll get two videos of this format before any feedback, which is
Hey,
fine. Um, Basically, I'm gonna summarize all the chapters and then talk about the highlights for me. Which
yeah.
there's some overwhelming highlights this time.
Yeah, and man, I really liked the way we did the format last time. So, like you said, we don't know how anyone else likes it, but I really liked
I
it.
certainly like it. So let's go through the quick summaries. 13.8 is just kind of a chapter where they track down Bonesaw as the battle is raging on. They also find Gru in this one. 13.9 is Bonesaw has captured all the heroes and is torturing Taylor, and Gru unlocks his stand.
Yes,
13.10 is Gru and Taylor's confrontation. Well, I don't know why I'm saying Gru and Taylor. I should probably say Brian and Taylor.
there you go.
13.A is an interlude with Pigo, I believe.
I think that's
At least that's how the We Got Worm guys say it.
I think it's like a that's like French, right?
Frenchish.
Yeah.
Uh, it's her thought, her point of view of all the current events and her future plans. 14.1 is kind of your usual regrouping chapter, but it kind of has more to deal with how are they going to interrogate Cherish for more information.
Yeah.
And finally, 14.2 is a fight against Siberian, which that's a big woof.
Yeah.
But let's jump to the most significant things here. There's one thing I didn't mention last time we talked about, and it's two things about Taylor. One, how she tells Sundancer to attack an area with civilians, because she's like, oh, they're already in danger anyways, was kind of her mindset there. That was kind of shocking. She doesn't really bat an eye to it either.
Yeah, I think we've kind of been making these stepping stones with Taylor where way back in the day if the thought of even like not even killing, just harming civilians came up, she'd have been like, "No, we're not doing that. Fuck off," and everyone would be like, "Oh, come on."
Come
And
on, hurt him.
then we've kind of had this progression where once she's hurt someone herself, it's easier for her to do it in the future.
Yeah, and
And then when it
she started violent and has only really gotten more and more violent. I feel.
and then when it comes to the matter of death, that's always kind of been a scary thing, and it took a long time for us to even kind of get to that subject. But then in the merchant rave that she went to, she allows
Some
that
guy to die.
that man to die. She doesn't kill him herself, but she knows that he is not going to make it out, and she leaves anyway. And I think that was a big stepping stone.
And
Um,
this would probably be the next big logical
yeah,
conclusion. That and her being totally okay with killing Mannequin.
yeah,
At least they tried.
yeah.
Anyways.
She's been, I think, doing a lot of thinking about this in the Slaughterhouse Nine arc, where she's like, could I kill a member of the Slaughterhouse Nine? and kind of had varying levels of okayness with it
We
as they
we
do
talked
more.
about it last time, where I think we both agreed that now she's pushed past the point where it's pretty clear that she thinks she can.
Yeah, and
In the
even
heat of the moment, I guess we'll have to see. But
even if she wouldn't be able to, I think she is at the point where she is okay offloading that responsibility onto someone else. She's
absolutely, she's feeling no guilt towards
a
that.
building full of civilians, but I think her conscience would be more okay telling Sundancer, "Oh yeah, yeah, go ahead."
Yeah, yep, and asking them if they're willing to kill and stuff like that. Another point that's kind of adjacent to it is how she just beats the shit out of Cherish and just kicks her face multiple times. Just classic violent, just terrible Taylor behavior.
And I don't care as much because it's Cherish.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
this moment was always a little comedic for me because she kicks her in the mouth and she's like, "Hope she reinforced your teeth," and Cherish is like, "Yeah, she did," and like I almost I almost picture Ben Stiller saying it because I feel like that's a line he would have in a movie. Like, yeah, she did, bitch.
Ben Stiller will play the part of Cherish on my Netflix adaptation of Worm.
You heard it here first.
It's gonna be great. As soon as Wild Bow allows me,
Oh, it's in the works.
it's in the works.
I lied. It's not in the works.
Let's talk about the first big topic I want to talk about. I thought the build up to finding Gru and his actual just state was very tense and just horrifying. Um, he's basically flayed open, and his organs and veins are strewn all over this. Like it, they described it as like a large fridge like space.
Yeah, and like it's not even on, so it's hot and like wet in there. And
And just moving into the room is going to hurt him just because his like nervous system is just spread out like a web,
yeah,
which Jesus fuck.
that entire description was really intense for me. And even before we get the description of it, I was already just put on edge because whenever they opened it, I think her words were Brian was in there and he was alive, but then she follows that up with I couldn't have been unhappier at that realization.
Yeah, it was the build up to it was really good.
And
I don't know if this is Eclipse level. It's hard to say. Eclipse was horrific for many people,
yeah.
but
I
it's
think
close.
the most interesting thing going on here while we're on this particular moment in time is the other people like ballistic. It's assumed he just automatically assumes
It's time to kill him
yeah, like okay, we're putting him out of his misery. Like he doesn't even ask her, "Can I put him out of his misery?"
because
He's like,
of course.
I'll make it quick. Like we're obviously doing this." Uh,
Also wrote this down. This was a big point for me.
and Taylor obviously is very emotional about this. She doesn't want to let him go, and from the outside, this does seem very maybe unreasonable on her part. And I realize this is a thing that people actually do in real life when they have a loved one who I don't know, they might have been in very painful intensive care in the hospital and they're not necessarily going to get better and it's hard for them to let them go, to let them pull the plug, and I think Taylor's in a similar headspace to that right now.
Yeah, she basically says she's willing to let him suffer if it means there's a chance that they can help him, which is potentially selfish, but also you can understand where she's coming from.
And
However, Gru is super not okay with this, as we'll find out later.
oh yeah.
Um, we could actually technically talk about this now because I feel like this is a good segue into the big conflict between them later in this section that I read.
I think it makes sense. It's kind of a good segue.
We'll double back in a second, but I found this really interesting. I feel like this has been building up for so long, you know, and it hasn't been like super apparent, but we have noted like they debate a lot on their different views. But it's like kind of friendly debate. It's like they're not being aggressive towards each other, but they have clash views, and we've talked about it. And it really explodes. I think it's in 13.10 where he's just like he says quite a lot of things, but it basically boils down to I just hate how you're so headstrong because you know you can get yourself out of these situations and you just don't think of the consequences of it, and it hurts all of us. And then he goes on to also accuse her of forcing these situations so she can seem more helpful, which to me was a big accusation. How do you feel? How I guess you know more than me, but how did you feel about that when like
Yeah,
he's making these kinds of accusations to her?
yeah. So as far as like the things he's saying about her and kind of that accusation, they always have kind of had differing philosophies on how they should tackle going into fights or situations like this. I think back in the days when the good old days when they would have their meetings about the crimes they're doing.
Gru would always say no, and then he'd be coerced into saying yes.
Yeah, he was always kind of the reserved one where unless he was 100% sure they would be okay, which you can never be 100% sure, he was like, we shouldn't do it. And Taylor was always the one who maybe she wanted to prove herself to them or maybe she actually wanted to do it. She was always like, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to go on the offensive. We're going to attack. So they had very differing philosophies here. And when we get to this moment, Gru is aware of this and he doesn't like it. He's like, this causes problems for people. Like, if you're always going to be going on the offensive, it's not always going to be the other people getting hurt. Sometimes it'll be us. And
Like now, and now I'm scarred for life.
yeah, and he
And
makes that
Taylor's the one that pushed for this current plan, as far as he explains it.
and he says this was your plan that did this to me. And then she also has the rebuttal where she's like, I offered to be the one who got swapped out. Um, and I guess if we go back to Gru's accusation of maybe you're always doing these things, being aggressive to prove yourself, and on some subconscious level, I think that might be true about Taylor.
It's that
But
that really took me off guard. Yeah,
at the same time, I think this is just the kind of person she is. Is she is the offensive. She is the conflict driven person. She
or she became the offensive. You know, she held it in for so long with her normal life, to where as soon as the story starts, she's just aggressive with her villain life. You know, like it's so like I don't particularly like Taylor, but I also felt kind of bad. Like, oh wow, I never saw her in this light, and I hope that's not true. Maybe in some conscious level, like you said, it could be, but I don't see her as quite that maybe manipulative or even smart enough to manipulate these people this well.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know if she's manipulating them, but I do think Taylor has realized that she thrives in these situations where she is on the offensive, and
Definitely, but I don't think it's like, oh, they'll need me because I'm good at it. It's honestly, the word escape comes up a lot early in the story, you know. And the podcasts have helped me remember these things, but in my mind at least, it's always felt like this was her escape from her shitty bullying life, you know.
yeah,
Um,
if there's any element of this that is her wanting to prove herself, I think it's more subconscious than conscious.
yeah, yeah. So this was a really good talk. Let's double back now to, holy shit, this chapter 13.9.
Yeah,
This
holy
was a banger. Um, there's so much to talk about with this one. So it's the one where Bonesaw is torturing Taylor. She's explaining the passengers. It's the first name drop of the passengers. I was like, oh shit, I don't feel
yeah,
guilty for knowing this word anymore.
yeah,
And it's way earlier than I expected for some reason.
yeah. So, what's your kind of thought right now on the passengers? Like, what do you have any thoughts? Even I don't know.
So I do. She explains that, God, it's so fucking weird. There's like a creature that crawls into your brain. This is not verbatim, and it's kind of expanding the idea, but like basically something crawls into your brain, and once a trigger effect happens, it lodges itself into a particular part of the brain. They name it, um, and that is the control center of your powers.
Yeah.
What the fuck, man? That's so bizarre and interesting. And she's seen it happen. She's straight up forced people to go into trigger events, and she's seen it happen. So it's not like a thing where she's misjudging it. Like, what is this creature? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. The way whenever I read this particular chapter, I'm always reminded of before I had ever read this story. Sometimes I would look at stories like X-Men, and just because of the way I am, I don't think most people do this.
Oh
I
yeah,
would
you're
look at
very Bradley.
yeah, I would look at a power like maybe storms, where she can control the weather, she can make lightning, like mini tornadoes, depending on the version. And I would say to myself, like, how does her power know what weather is? Or how does it decide which kinds of weather she can make, or how strong she can make this particular weather? Like, is she consciously going like, oh, I'm going to send the air here, it's going to make a tornado? Um, I always thought that on some level there has to be some kind of thinking behind the power that decides what can it make, what can it not make, how strong are the things it makes. And Bonesaw's kind of doing the same thing here, where she's like, even when you're not necessarily conscious, your power is making these decisions, your bugs are going places. I think Taylor noticed this at some point too. The second time she fought Lung, she had like told her bugs to start gathering these bags of money, and they kept doing it even when she wasn't thinking about it. So Bonesaw's kind of on this line of thinking where there is something that she calls the passenger, which does the actual thinking for the power, and this organ, so to speak, in
Yeah.
people's brains, that's kind of like their method to control it, where it's like, oh, I have a hand, and I'm sure there are neurons in the brain you fire that tell your hand to move. This organ of the brain is what signals your power to do stuff. But she makes it clear that this part of your brain does not give you the power, it just tells it what to do. She said, you can just totally carve this entire area out of the brain, and the power still works. They just don't control it, it becomes instinct.
Yeah, she had the idea of cutting it or altering it such that Taylor couldn't really control her bugs, but they were always attracted to her, for
Yeah.
example. Um, Also, very specifically, it is not a natural part of your brain, I guess, um, unless your body has parasites or, say it with me, gang, worms
Ooh.
that grow these things inside of your body or something. If I had to guess, and just because this hasn't come up in the story at all, these are creatures from that second universe that exists. Maybe I have no idea. And if I had to make more guesses, uh, I'm guessing an Endbringer is if these things take over your whole body and not just that part of your brain, you maybe mutate into an Endbringer.
Ooh.
Something similar to that could be the explanation for case 53s or 52s, one of the cases.
You heard it here first.
Jesus Christ. It reminds me of the We Got Worm guys, where it's like Taylor and Rachel are going to be best friends, and then they haven't gotten to, at least as far as I've gotten, they haven't gotten to the part where she gets fucking shoved in foam. I can't wait for that.
But they love
Um,
each other.
but they, yeah, sure. They totally will be besties, but it's gonna be a slow process. That's my guess. Yeah, I don't know, man. I still think Noelle is. I don't. The Endbringers were coming for Noelle. She's probably the Endbringer esque. I don't know. These things didn't just appear. I don't know.
She could be one of these things you're talking about where it it like mutates your body into an Endbringer.
Maybe, maybe
Spec-
you wouldn't say that if it was true. So I'm wrong. So,
I'm just
uh,
in your headspace.
yeah, we'll see about that. Um, yeah, that was a big deal. Um, One thing that was really, really weird and interesting about this is when Taylor's left alone, like Bonesaw's fighting Pariah, who happened to be in the building or some shit. Um, and she's thinking about it. she's like, oh, if I give my passenger more power, maybe I can get out of the situation. What's really weird about this is that she doesn't seem surprised at all at the revelation of the passenger. She rolls with it. She's like, oh, yeah, okay, maybe if I give my passenger more power, I can get out of this. It's not like a what is a passenger? I guess that makes sense. Like there's no rationale like that unless I missed it. Uh
Yeah,
which is weird.
I think any other person would be like, "Oh my god, what the hell is she talking about?" The kind of person Taylor is, I think to her, hearing this information, she's just like, "Oh, that's just another tool I can use."
Is
She's
that is that really it? I don't know if I like that. Like I would have at least like a line or two of like because that makes me think two things. She knows about them, but they seem like a rare find. Um, or she like subconsciously, it's like whenever you get a stand in JoJo's, you know how it works. Maybe subconsciously, everyone knows that they're there all along, so it's not that surprising when they're spoken about or something. Maybe that'll be explained later.
maybe she'll do some more thinking about her passenger.
She fucking better, because I really wanted that. Um, okay, more shit starts to go down. They're about to kill Aisha, right? And that's when we see Bill and Ted again, which is their names now, by the way.
Right.
Do you know who I'm speaking of?
I don't know who the fuck you're talking about.
Bill and Ted are our friendly
Oh, obviously.
intradimensional creatures.
Oh yeah. How'd you know
Right.
their canon names? All
Yeah,
right.
well, the wiki spoils everything, man.
Oh yeah, Bill and Ted.
Bill and Ted. I know passengers have fucking names somehow. I don't remember any of them, but whatever. Uh, so right, I theorized that Bill and Ted, when they first showed up, signified the meeting or like the firing of two nearby passengers. Which what the last time it would happen, it was with Scrub. Um, and it was like Taylor's passenger was talking to Scrub's passenger, and they were connecting in some sort of metaphysical way. This happened again, and this time I would suspect that it's Taylor and Brian's because Brian's the one who went through his second trigger event here. Um, and it's like the what I was driving while they were going through this, and I was just going like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" As like the reader is reading through these passages because it is out of this world. They're traveling to Earth, but the description makes it seem like they're phasing in and out of multiple realities. And I can only assume that they're trying to find the Earth that Taylor currently lives in because she or Brian are the ones calling out to them. uh I guess maybe that feeds into my these come out of a different Earth theory with the passengers. Like they're, man, my head
It's
hurts.
funny. It's funny because this is like a thing where if you're reading the story for the first time, I think it's like intentionally cryptic enough to where you could never possibly know what is actually going on here. But once you do know what's going on here and have context, you're like, oh,
This all makes sense to you?
uh, for the most part.
What the fuck, man? Like it's when it's traveling through all these multiple Earths, it's also phasing through multiple people. Like I think, as I recall, it's like people who aren't related to Taylor or Brian, like just random ass people are showing up in this vision. Maybe they're not random. I don't know, man. Bill and Ted are the most interesting. They leave. Brian gets like four new abilities, yada yada. Burn Scar dies. So you know
Breaker,
what? You know what, Bradley? Someone died in Worm. I
yeah,
can
but
say
you
it.
know, she's barely a person, so
She no. Well, yeah. You know what? The nine don't count. I will still say no good guy fucking dies in Worm, and they get into the most dangerous shit. So the fact Brian walked out of this makes my no one dies in Worm joke still pretty relevant. Because Jesus Christ, he was flaying open and just spread out like a spider web.
yeah, I think the trick to the story is that no one actually dies; they just wish they would die.
Yeah, but I also want one of them to actually die. So we'll
Oh
see what
well,
happens.
I don't know. We'll see if the genie will grant your wish.
You've said that the last seven discussions. No one's gonna die.
I said we'll see.
Yeah, we're still seeing. Um, So jumping on to Pigot's Pigos
Big O.
interlude. It was cool seeing Legend. I think it's the first time we really see him. I got no vibe out of him. He just seems like a hero man. Is that fair to say?
I think he is. I think he is like the just classically good hero. I remember at some point I had heard that the members of the Triumvirate, which would be Legend, Alexandria, and Eidolon, if you were to combine the three of them, they're supposed to be Superman. Um, and I think Legend's component of that is like the truth, justice, and the American way component of
Okay.
Superman. And the other two are much more Superman's like powers. But yeah,
Okay.
Legend is like the classic heroic goody goody comic book character, which I
Is he
kind
the
of
one who
appreciate.
showed up during Endbringer, or was that Scion, which is not these three? Which
I think all three of the Triumvirate were present.
okay. I just remember him shooting beams at people. It seemed like a really generic power. Was that
Uh,
him?
Legend can shoot lasers, and to be more specific, these lasers can do all kinds of things. I think he can independently control many different lasers at once. They can turn at right angles, go around curves. He can make them invisible. They could ignite things, freeze things, disintegrate things. They could be
Man,
explosive.
that's a lot of stuff.
He's
I,
very strong.
I'll take this aside and say Worm so far has a really interesting power system, and the trigger events are cool. Overall, I don't like a lot of Worm powers. There's so many components to them. Like that laser power is this really generic power that just can kind of do everything. And then I really don't like the Tinker power set in general. It depends though, because like Bakura makes bombs that can do anything, so it's kind of still like super generic. But then you got like Kid Win. Like, what the fuck does Kid Win do? He has a hoverboard that he made, and he could
So
theoretically make anything.
the general way they describe Tinkers in the story, I don't know if it's the most accurate to how it really works because they say Tinkers have like one kind of technology they can make, but I think it's more accurate to say they have
A
like a method
specialty.
of working that works for
Uh,
them. Because, for example, Arms Master, he can make a variety of things,
and they're
but
miniaturized.
his actual specialty is fitting more technology into one space than should be allowed to be there. So if someone else wanted to do the same thing our master made, it probably wouldn't be as mobile. Like Bakura, she can do a ton of different things, but her activation mechanism is always going to be a
An
bomb.
explosive. Yeah.
And I think Kid Wins is, I believe it's supposed to be modular equipment, where, for example, someone else, let's say Kidwin and someone else could both make like laser guns, but someone else might have to make four different guns if they wanted four different kinds of lasers. But
But he
Kidwin
can swap
could make,
out like power
yeah, he could
cells or
swap
some
out
shit.
like cartridges or turn a dial or something. So I think
Hmm.
Tinkers is more accurate to say it's like their method of working or stuff like that.
I guess I like more gimmicky power sets or like more specific power sets in my stuff. Or like weird stuff. Like there's a lot of powers that are just like I can do all sorts of things. Like you look at Glory Girl and stuff like that, or these Superman kind of people. But there's also some good ones, like Gru's new power, which is to absorb abilities through his darkness, is really cool.
Yeah.
Um, so back to Pigo, she basically plans to do two bombing runs, one to kill the Nine and the second to kill the villains. And Legend is like, that's not okay. You're breaking the truce of heroes and villains. And she's like, well, I'm not a hero or a villain. I'm just kind of a government lady. Just wanted to point that out because I'm really excited to see how that turns out.
Yeah, she's very much in the mindset of two birds, one stone. And Legend, he is like the Boy Scout hero, and he is just like, no, we're not gonna do this. They're shitty people, maybe, but they're
But
helping.
we got rules to
Yeah,
this. Um, if I had to guess the trajectory of this, then I'm guessing because I've been wondering and I've been talking to you like, where does the story go from here? Because there's two more Endbringers, and there's Scion, who I suspect is like a Doctor Manhattan kind of potential future threat. Um, but then it's like in Cauldron, but then that's still not quite enough, right? So maybe because of this bombing run, the next arc then is a full-on assault against the heroes. That would be my guess. Um, that you can put that in your spreadsheet and snort it.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first. Um, okay, the last. Oh man. Okay, I'll go through it fast. But 14.1 was I starred every point I wrote down. I only star points I really want to talk about, which means I wanted to talk about everything that I wrote down in this chapter because it was really
There you
good. Chapter ones are usually the most boring. I feel like of every arc. They're regrouping chapters, and there's a lot of Taylor involved, and not like interesting Taylor stuff, just kind of like regrouping Taylor. This one was a cool meetup between the Travelers and the Undersiders on how they should handle talking to Cherish. They can't let her manipulate them. They know she wants to. That's how she has fun in life. Um, they have this really interesting. Well, the first thing that I wrote of note, it's been a while since Alex done anything. As you recall, he's one of the most interesting characters for me.
Yeah.
He openly talks about like how he's raped people before, basically. Uh, and like they just kind of brush it off, like, oh, there goes that crazy Alec and his lack of emotions and his raping. I kind of wish someone would call him out on it, and it does happen later in this chapter. But I kind of wish it was someone who had morals of some sort. I just want him to maybe not call him out on it, but I really want someone to discuss it with him so I can just get more of both people's mindsets to that. Because Taylor kind of thinks of it a little bit, but it's really in the grand scheme of things and how many words are in the chapter. It's like kind of a passing thought. Like, oh yeah, I guess Alec would have done this.
And one thing I do kind of like about this moment and the Cherish talk in general is that basically their little like 2 minute talk with her is her trying to grab what she believes would be the hardest hitting emotional thing she can think of and bouncing it off of them. And for everyone except Gru, um, her strategy doesn't really work. And the thing I kind of liked about Alex was she does bring up these horrible things he does, and at first he's kind of doing like the oh well you did it too, and
And you guys are worse, etc.
yeah, I think the reason it doesn't hit Regent anymore, and the reason I kind of like his reaction to it, is that he is accepting that these are bad things he's done, and he doesn't pretend they're any less bad. He will say that he was young, but he could hide behind excuses like, oh, dad made me do it, stuff like that. But he kind of says, like, I was a kid, and he doesn't necessarily say that he didn't enjoy those things. He's like, yeah, I mean, they were good, but he's not going to do them anymore.
Yeah,
And I
I,
think
I
what's interesting about this is that for a lot of the bad things Taylor has done, she would probably try and take those excuses like, oh, I was doing this or I had to do it because of this. Alec isn't taking the easy road out of dad made me do it. He's like, yeah, I did them, but I mean, I don't do that anymore.
I really wanted to talk about that. So there's two parts of that also. Um, when Cherish is like calling them out on everyone's weaknesses, I had a feeling, and Alec always does this. He always draws out information very calmly in these situations, right?
Yeah.
He does this interesting thing where he absorbs a lot of the blow, a lot of the time that Cherish has. He makes sure it's spent on him, but then as soon as she starts turning on Gru, he's very quickly like, "Hey, Cherish, you're running out of time." Or what's Cherish's real name? Like I think he uses her real name.
I think Cherry.
But Cherry, you're running out of time here. You got to move on. So I found it interesting because like it's like he's absorbing the blows to himself because he knows he can take it, but when she switches to the most vulnerable person on the team, he tries to hurry her up. So he kind of wastes her time to pick on people on himself as much as he can, and then tries to get her back to business as soon as she targets someone weaker.
That's a really good catch. I feel like he's smarter than a lot of people will give him credit for, and you're right. Like he knows that Brian probably isn't going to be able to handle this.
When he talked about the whole rape thing early on, it was more like, yeah, spending time with people, like it always feels good, like having body contact. And Taylor is like, oh, I guess this is his weird way of trying to like cheer us up or get us together or just like remind us of like a good thing. Um, which is he's very thoughtful this chapter. Um, and it's you brought it up yourself, like he doesn't really show remorse for what he does, but he says he's not like that. He's like, I did those things. She's like, you did those things that you liked, but then he's like, no, you guys liked me doing that. And it's kind of showing this image of like, I've moved past that. And I had to think back to myself, and it's like, he did torture Shadowstalker, but compared to who he was in the past, and this was also like a rightful revenge, like as he's torturing Shadowstalker, he's very cold, but you get this sense that he's also kind of doing it for Taylor in like a small way. Um, so I kind of believe him when he says he's not the same person. He's still like a terrible person, but he's turning into a better one a little bit, especially compared to who he was. At least that's how I like to see it.
I like it.
The last thing I want to bring up with this whole section is the whole gimmick of everyone take a page from this book, and the page relates to how bad your secret is. Very interesting things. One of the most interesting ones was I was like, okay, Regent or Alec is going to get the lowest one because he has no shame. He did the opposite. He took the third highest, I think, either second or third highest, because he didn't want to say those things to his teammates because he knew it would unnerve them. Not because he was shy, but he's like, oh, these guys are gonna feel bad if they hear the actual graphic details of what I've done.
Yeah.
Really thoughtful of him. I am very sure that Trickster and Sundancer are the two highest.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
That or Tattletale, but I'm gonna say Trickster's definitely one of them. It's not Ballistic because he's not interesting enough.
Yeah.
I don't think Circus is here right now, right? You said he's just a mercenary, so he's not a factor. I don't know if Ollie or Noel were here. I don't think they were. Yeah, so Taylor, she picked like 100 something, 150. No, it was, I don't remember.
She picked a somewhat high number, but not nearly as high as theirs, and I think
it wasn't the lowest. It was like maybe the fourth or
yeah. I think the secret she had in mind was I'm eventually maybe gonna have to betray Coil. So
yeah. She thought about it. Is like, yeah, but if they find out, I can work around that for like given the situation. Like she wasn't that worried about it, which I'm glad. In the grand scheme of things, I was like, people usually make a bigger deal out of their own problems, so I feel like in general the number should have skewed all a little bit higher. But I'm very interested to see the order, and Tattletale kept all the pages so she can do her terrible sneaking and figuring out later.
Yeah, you imagine she's like looking at the pages and she's like, oh, I bet this was this person, and if it was, oh, this must be their secret.
Yeah. Lastly, Siberian's a furry. GG.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Bradley, you got anything that you want to talk about that I haven't talked about?
Worm is JoJo's now. Everyone has stands.
There are more stands. There's like a 200% stand increase than last time we talked.
Has a stand. Genesis has a stand. Shatterbird is Regent.
Orion has a stand.
Orion has a stand. Okay. Everyone has stands now.
Yes, very good. Regent has the best stand.
Yeah.
God, that is a lot. Yeah, the chase with Siberian was really drawn out, man. You know how I am with Worm action. It's hit or miss for me, and this was one of like the slightly more missy ones. It was still tense because she's chasing Panacea and biting her finger slowly, which is a really terrifying image. But it was a long chapter of that.
Yeah, this is one of those chapters where, because I'm me, I still tremendously enjoy it, but I do think I think it could have been done faster, maybe.
Yeah. I'm halfway through 13.3 right now, and I feel like some of that could have been wrapped into the same chapter. But we're not gonna talk about that because I don't want to take any more of your lovely times.
Lovely times.
That's what we got for Worm. That was a good talk. I can't wait to find out more about Bill and Ted and their
Bill and
excellent adventures.
Adventure next time on Take That You Worm.
Bye bye.